people using this tape, you people out of town, some of you might consider whether you ever want to use this first part. I just decided to say, if you talk for a little while, whether you ever want to use this for the public or not. Have any of you, I'm talking, of course, here specifically, or more specifically the people in Atlanta, but this applies to some of you people in other cities. You'll have to figure out, I will say, you know who you are, so you're going to have to figure out who you are. But have any of you noticed that either on one level, the relationship between me talking and us holding these meetings between me and you has either changed some, or you have changed some? As much as on some weeks I can pace the stage up here and do some hand gestures and raise my voice a little and up and down and curse and talk to the kid and do these few little bits that I keep making up. And in a sense, sometimes it almost sounds like a sermon of sorts. But when I say that things have at least subtly changed somewhere, can all of you, on your best day, let's assume your best day is right this second, while you're hearing me or hearing this tape, even without some of you realizing it in this particular way, you are past the point on a good day of needing to be preached to. It's not a matter now, since we'll assume that most of you are stuck with me as your spiritual leader for the rest of your life, it's kind of too late to change, it's too late to look around. You sort of become accustomed to me. Turns out I'm not real dangerous, and I don't try to pick up your women. I don't ask you to give me everything you've got. So let's assume that you're sort of stuck, that you're going to ride it out. And so it's no longer that I'm having to some way to persuade you, to convert you, to make you feel bad. What I had mentioned in the last several weeks, if you recall, I put it to you first as a kind of question about what is it, what kind of information apparently coming from a spiritual source or some kind of philosophical system, what can it seem to offer people other than relief, hope, information, or pleasure, or fun? Now there's a lot to that. To begin with, as always, you should have found it curious in a topographical sense as to why is it that that's all? And there's got to be more. Now this whole big, wide, wonderful universe is not just our solar system, it's not just our planet, and us being free human beings and minds that can wander and various talents. There's got to be something else that you could get from life, especially areas that seem to be sort of exotic areas within life's own nervous system. That there's got to be something other than hope, relief, information, or pleasure. And maybe I'll get to that in a few minutes, something else, expanding on that. But what I specifically wanted to point out, some of you haven't really noticed it yet, but let me point out to you that you're just about beyond those first two categories. That at your best now, you don't really need any more relief. Now I know that some of you have physical problems, and some of you have not undergone anything resembling a miraculous cure since you've been involved with this. Some of you are having to take medication. Some of you are still having to seek medical assistance. And that's the way life is, up to a certain point. And just because I do not spend time or even give the impression that I have a great deal of concern about any physical ailment you have, any inherent weakness, or just because I do not apparently or threaten to try and involve you in some kind of miraculous healing, does not mean that I have no concern and I do not take you into consideration. But everybody that's alive is hurting somewhere. If you're the best of health and you live long enough, you're going to get arthritis. Your muscles are going to ache. You just start to fall apart. But I know that some of you have had maladies and ills that you've had since you were born almost. And in one sense, there's really nothing that I'm supposed to do about that if I could. If I did have the energy and the knowledge, had the access to the energy to do which of course I can't really bypass this because you know that I have gotten involved on several occasions when it was very serious. But there is a limit. I could not, in a sense, in a real sense, undertake some kind of miraculous or attempted miraculous treatment on everybody that is sick here. Because if I said that we're going to do that, 99% of you would finally raise your hand and say, well, all right, if we're going to do that, some of you would even say, well, I never told you. But if we're going to do that, I've had an ache in my back for the last 15 years, and you'd finally tell me. And there's just a limit to it. And what I'm really inferring is it's, in a sense, it's no longer that important. It's not even to you. But I know that some of you still, when you have a bad day or whatever your pain is, whatever your ache is, that you think, boy, I'd give anything if I didn't have this. If it wasn't that, it'd almost be something else. People are born deformed. People are born with some kind of ailment. That's just it. And all of you should be looking after yourself as best you can. If it got so serious that I would consider the possibility of something extraordinary under the right conditions. But the point is most of you should now realize, at least looking back on it, that you're about past the point that that's of any great consideration. That you don't sit around wondering whether I am finally going to whip a faith healing on you or whether somebody else is. Now what will happen, I will tell you this since I've said it more or less before. If you can press on with this, and you can get your nervous system, just take some of my shorthand descriptions I've already used that we've kind of established as a currency between us, and you can get parts of your nervous system ignited, and you undergo a kind of serious jolt in your nervous system. It's a literal fact that your genes get shook up to patterns. Now, I can tell you this, that there is some possible I'll tell you hope, rather than search for another word, that what seems to be some of your inherited physical shortfalls will be affected. That is a fact. Any of you that felt as though that you were more or less without physical shortcomings, when you undergo it, you're still going to feel better. Even if you thought, well, compared to everybody else, I guess I feel pretty good. I don't take aspirin. I don't ache anywhere particularly. I got no real complaint. I never go to a doctor. And there's some people like that in the group. But I'm telling you, when you go through this, the first stage of it, the first time, you'll realize, hey, I had no great complaint, but I even feel better than I did. That is what happens, because it shakes up the inherited wiring patterns, the inherited DNA patterns of what you were, and it just happens. You feel better. That's a cheap shot. You feel different. Now, better is nothing. Different is everything. But still, by and large, speaking in general, we're past the point that you people are holding on to that kind of hope, that is the raison d'etre, that you're involved with this, that you are not really staying here looking for a spiritual healing of some kind. And as far as the relief part, I know that on a bad day, some of you might still think that you have the blue meanies that get hold of your soul and your emotions, and that you still get the blahs and you get depressed. Hell, I'll bet money that Buddha got depressed. Now, don't take this personally and try to apply it to me that I'm saying this kind of thing allegorically. But I'll bet you people like, Moses, for all you know, he was a manic depressive. Jesus could have had a lithium shortage, and they just didn't know how to treat it. Having the blues is no more unusual than having arthritis, than having muscle aches, and having a weak back. Now, of course, when you are the one having it, and if it has seemed to have been a constant companion throughout your life, I understand that it's something else to you. But also, now, all of you should understand. You should know I've told you directly, I've told you indirectly, And now some of you have found out through your own experience, what is called depression, what are called emotional problems, are not psychological fucking problems. There are no such things. There's an aluminum shortage in your body. It's an overload of barium. You got too much clay in your blood. That's all it is. But it's serious enough when you've got it. But it is not a curse. It is not something that the gods have put on you because of the sins of your forefathers. And it is certainly not something that's happened to you because your father mistreated you, your mother ignored you, your mother died when you were young. All that may have happened, but you could have been also born with 3 years. There is no difference. There is a reason that humanity is made to believe that there is this dichotomy, that there is a difference between the head and the body, that there is a difference between man psychologically and man physiologically. And there's not. There simply is not, and by now most of you have a strong suspicion of that without me preaching. And I have made, at my last count, I believe, was 1,700 and something examples. I know you weren't counting. An approach is trying to get you to personally see this, try to hit you in the head with it, hit you in the face with it, slip up behind you and tickle you with it. But most of you now have some, at least nonverbal, suspicion that this is true. In other words, there's nothing psychologically unique about you. There's nothing psychologically uniquely inept about you. You are no more psychologically damaged than you are physically damaged, using ordinary terminology. There is no difference. So, now let us go to the third area that I say would be of new information. Now, without you analyzing in this way when you got involved with this, still, all of you expected to get some kind of new information. Some of you were wired up that you were the type that the new information you wanted amounted to this. All you wanted was the secret word. You wanted some of the first two I just mentioned. You wanted to have some relief. You wanted some hope for the future, some hope for another life. But you did want some knowledge. As I said, the epitome of this is the secret word. Without Groucho Marx, without the duck, you still want a secret word. That me or someone going to give you this word, this chant, secret word, secret sentence, a secret short paper that you could read while in the bathroom. And it'll be the kind of thing that then perhaps you could join in and help affect your own healing process, your own miracles, that if you just knew the word. That surely in the past, these Moseses and these Pharaohs and all these Swamis, I mean, it just seems obvious that they knew some kind of verbal secret. It's in all the religions that all these mystics, all of these men who were close to the gods had these secret knowledge, and we're talking about knowledge. That they had some words, they had some chants, they had something that they, like a prayer, they could go off by themselves and in some way communicate with these higher forces. But they did it through, if it's knowledge, then it can be talked about. Also, on a good day, which I'm saying most of you now have more good days than you realize. On a good day, you know now. By me telling you directly, by me hollering and cursing and stomping my feet, and then trying to trick you, and then being subtle and making jokes and letting Kyrut write all these, well over 1,700, I guess. Telling you that this idea of some direct knowledge that is going to alter your nervous system, which of course is not the way you looked at when you started. You just thought, well, it's spiritual magic. You don't want to. None of you start out wanting to hear any of this stuff about your nervous system and about your molecules. All you wanted was me or somebody to say zip and give you the secret word, the secret zip, and that'd be it. That is not the kind of knowledge that can help. In a sense, there is no knowledge that can help. What has been going on is me putting out sound waves, and to lesser degrees, me playing with the light. I don't play with it a lot. A few gestures. I don't dress up. I don't do anything to visually be very impressive, assuming I could. So in one sense, all I have been doing, or the major part of what I've been doing, is using sound waves. But they can be magic, but not the instantaneous magic that the word itself, a word itself, is going to convey some secret knowledge. It is me using sound waves that are out of the ordinary, me using sound waves that are not contemporarily city-bred. And that's what I've been calling fresh data, revolutionary info. As I send out sound waves and it seems to get into your ears and it makes sort of sense. I start out a sentence, I start out a paragraph, and it seems to take some abrupt turn. But you would normally think about it as, well, it's strange ideas. It's strange sound waves, that's all it is. Now I'm doing a sense of magic, but instead of me getting a $2.95 toupee and a big old pinky ring and grabbing people on the forehead and saying, be healed, I don't even put my hands on you. But it's the same sort of thing. I'm sending out sound waves. So what is it that we're up to now? We've gone past the point, as I said, I'm backing up and talking to you, and none of this applies to all of you all the time. But you're also supposed to be good enough now to know that nothing applies to anything all the time. That nothing is true from every view, but everything is from some. It is not that every one of you have now reached some position that I say is beyond just the relationship of me being a parent, or you hoped I was some sort of spiritual leader and you're a follower. It's not that all of you all the time, or any of you all the time, are at that position. That's a 3D world. That's the illusionary world, as best ordinary five senses can handle it, that everything runs linearly. That, all right, I'm either past the point of being some blind follower or I'm not. On a good day, you know better than that. What it would be, to put it in words, is you don't know what you are anymore. That's not it either, but that is closer to the truth than saying, all right, I am either a follower or I'm not. That's like saying, well, I am either a can of vegetable soup or I'm not. Whatever it is, if it's down to the contrast, if it's down to the binary sampling, we hadn't had any change effected. But it should now be more of a question of how can I be entertained? Now let me point out to you that since we have been standing here talking tonight, that is, since I first met you individually and collectively, right now, even while we've been talking, since we started this tape rolling right now, several years ago, whenever you first saw the tape, that's when we started right now. While we've been talking, life has changed to the point that it's no longer sufficient, to say the least, that if this is going to go outside this room, outside these taping sessions, for it to be sent out on the basis of appealing to people that we can help relieve their concerns, their pains, their psychological ills. We can offer them hope, a better tomorrow, a better afterlife. All right, we've got information, or at least I do, and now you got some of it, and you can come up with your own versions of it. You can write plays, you can put on your own presentation to new people, new information. While we've been taping tonight, since I started just ad-libbing this, it's already changed. You know where it is? Well, you only got one choice left. For thousands of years, as long as man has been writing and talking about religion, there's always been somebody saying, hey, religion's dying. And they meant it for their day. But wait a minute, something's wrong. It's always been dying. Everything's always dying because everything is going through that kind of triaxial dance, one thing changing into another. But what we can do, assuming that we all stick together, that I let it stick together and you want to stick together, is no longer on the basis of offering people relief, offering people hope, or really offering people new information. This does not mean that the streets are still not full of people needing one or some combination of those three. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this. I am no longer involved, and therefore you're not, with feeding any of that. We, you don't know this, but I'm going to tell you we, which is just synonymous for me. We do not want any more people. Got nothing against them. Wish them well. It's just they don't enter into the ball game anymore. They are not part of the scene. We do not want people showing up who need relief, who want hope, or who really want new information. That religion, that approach, 3 of the 4 possibilities, more or less, have been shot to hell since I started talking tonight. Our responsibility now is almost limited to one thing, and that's entertainment. And since I've gone ahead and said this, I've got to ask you just as straightforward as possible with, of course, no sarcasm, hidden or otherwise, no cynicism. I just got to ask you rhetorically. No, I got to ask you seriously. What do you think that I have been doing all this time, especially the last few weeks and months? Have you not been entertained? Now you thought, if you had ever thought about it, you thought, well, I'm feeling some better, or you make notes of what I said just then, what I said last week when I was talking about this or that. Seemed to be important information that you wanted to write it down, you wanted to ponder it over some more yourself. You was hoping I would talk about it, that it might take away some of these areas that you're still confused about. On a good day, none of you are any more confused. I know sometimes you are. You got to remember this. Things are not linear, they just appear to be. But you're really no longer confused. You're not. You're no longer really any sicker than you got to be alive. So you don't really need relief. None of you are really any more worried than most moths are about what tomorrow may bring. That's not really funny, but no, you people are not really worried anymore about what's going to happen when I die. So you don't need that. And you're not really confused anymore. Now you think there's a lot more that you can learn from me, and I'm sure that some of you just wonder how long can I keep this up? Where do I get all this information, even though some of it you feel as though is maybe just a new retelling of something else. It always seems to unfold another corner, give you another viewpoint. It's just, at times, fascinating. Hell, sometimes I find it fascinating. And I'm not that easily impressed, especially by you-know-who. But some of it I just find just absolutely, well, it's more fun than anything I can find on TV. It's definitely better than anything in a movie or a book. It's entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. What's going to progress from here on out, more or less, is what I'm telling you. This does not mean that everything is going to stop and shift gears, and that I would never be involved in any way in holding out what might appear to be some hope to somebody somewhere, to some group at some particular time, because it's not this straight line phenomenon, but I'm telling you that our relationship, you people here, and those of you getting this by tape, and you know who you are, if you belong in the category I'm talking about, there is a 4-dimensional connection now between us. That is not just holding out hope. You don't have any faith in me. You're not looking for any great relief anymore. But you're no longer confused that if I never apparently gave any more lectures, if I never apparently was giving out new information, the fact is, and all of you know this, I'm not saying I'm going to do it because it would sound as though some of the fun had stopped. But if I never talked seriously, if I never apparently relayed any more, quote, information, you got to admit this. You know this on a good second. You got more than enough now to pray and chew over the rest of your life, as they say in Alabama. You got a satchel full of mashed potatoes and food already if I never gave out any more. You could take the notes you got and just stuff you remember, and I assure you, you could go away and work on this as far as it being a system, or new information, things you had never thought about, things that would take you into new neural corners. You're not confused anymore. So what is it? Again, we're back to it. There's only one possibility left. It's entertainment. It's pleasure. I repeat to you now, this does not mean that since I've started talking tonight that suddenly out there in the street, outside us meeting here and you people seeing in other cities watching this tape, it doesn't mean there in downtown Manhattan or Los Angeles or Miami or somewhere that suddenly out in the street all concerns for tomorrow is gone, all people are now healthy, and that all people now know as much as you do, that just got all kinds of info and they don't need. I don't mean that. Out there life is still what it is in the city. But it is not my responsibility. I am not involved with it. Now you are not involved with it on a direct, continuing basis of apparently offering people under whatever guise hope, relief, simply new information. It's entertainment. My responsibility, our responsibility, is about limited to that, to those people. Now, I do not mean, of course, simply putting on mime shows or juggling. It's still along these lines, but it is as though you were a kind of neural entertainer, a kind of nervous system comedian or dancer. But it is a form of stimulation. It is a form of entertainment. Now, even though I say that it has not been a sudden, in the last 15 minutes, change in life itself, I am telling you that gradually it's always been going on. The further you get away from people having to, day by day, worry about their physical existence, out having to hunt, cultivate, work from sun up to sundown, and actually not know whether they're going to be able to eat or feed their family or get out of the cold tonight. And that, all of us are exempt from that. All of you are past that. Even those of you between jobs, you're not in that position. And so the further you get away from that, the nervous system has got to be stimulated. You're not human, you're not alive. The greatest stimulation, in one sense, at least in the 3D world, is the fear of death. That is, having to get out. Right now, if you were living literally out in the woods, in an uncivilized area, and that you literally had to get out every morning and start moving, and to stay on the move all day looking for food, or you would die. You would not be bored, you would not feel stress, you would not get ulcers, and all those things. Of course, that does not mean that that's a better life. You would not be bored, you would not worry whether Francis Ford Coppola had blown his reputation to such a degree that no one will ever bankroll another movie. You wouldn't worry about whether George Lucas has lost his inspiration or whether there'd never be any more science fiction movies. You wouldn't worry about, my God, what happened to good network shows since Green Acres, there's nothing worth watching. You would not in any sense be bored when every morning when you awoke laying in a wet ditch, you woke up and you realized, I got a few hours to find some food or I may be dead. And while I'm not looking for food, there are other animals looking for me, that they're hungry and I'm their food. There is no question about being entertained. None. None. The entertainment is the nervous system staying acutely alive. Now, we're not faced with that. Well, what I want you to see in our day and time, and all of you are subject to it, you're surrounded by it, and I repeat again, I want you people should be able to do this. You can't just look at a scene that I verbally try to set up or a way in which I try to create a template for you to look at life as everything is this way. It is not. We still have yesterday alive out there in life, as 3D consciousness would call it. We've got tomorrow alive. We've got red circuit people alive. People are almost entirely red circuit. We've got people almost entirely yellow circuit driven. And then in the middle, they're all there together. It's not all or nothing. It's not all or anything. It's not a little bit and a whole lot. It's every possible contrast. But what I am telling you, that there is a segment of life's body of which I am very closely attuned, and now you are, that their primary problem now, if we can call it a problem, is not feeding themselves, not being sure that they've got a place to stay tonight out of the weather. It's not even worried about whether they're going to pay the mortgage on the condo they do have. The biggest problem they got is boredom. literally. And this does not mean, this is not just the idle rich now. We're talking about good red circuit people. What do you think professional wrestling is? I love hearing those that are on another level of life's coeval factory right now, like yellow circuit people and some blue circuit types, saying, how can you people go watch professional wrestling when it's a fake? And they think that, you know, they're having a laugh at these people. Out in the city, it's hard to tell who's laughing at who. Because people, for instance, I picked this example, like professional wrestling, the idea of somebody saying, don't you know it's a fake? There is a great living three-dimensional example of irrelevancy. That's got nothing to do with it. It's to be entertained. Now, if we would move in the 3D world to another area, then we get into into more yellow circuit type people might seem to be really far removed or going to the other end of the spectrum from physically going out to a cheap arena and drinking beer and then around cigar smoking and watching a bunch of big old fat hairy people bounce each other around. Apparently what might be another area, how about all you nice yellow circuit type people that read science fiction? You just never realized that science fiction is professional wrestling to the mind. It's not an attack on it, that's exactly what it is. And some of you here, the real laughs are those of you that can feel both of those. Those of you that read science fiction, and you would still go out and maybe go to a wrestling match. At least you would turn it on TV, and your red circuit can be entertained by simply, not whether this is the point about, listen, these people are not actual athletes and they're not really trying to hurt each other. That ain't the point. It's my red circuits getting entertained, watching people bounce around and turn flips and bang and fall on the floor and holler and scream. But it's the same thing in the yellow circuit to read. I think that science fiction as being, well, it's just the best example. And I know a lot of you read it. It is taking the yellow circuit and getting it to vibrate on those things, such as the red circuit is doing, watching professional wrestling. I can't do that. I don't know how to go about it. I'm not in shape. I don't even want to try it, but I can't do it. I could not put up with that. I could not do that. That takes some real talent. It takes a certain higher threshold for pain probably than I've got. But science fiction, here it is, absolutely cannot be done. It's what makes it interesting. It cannot be done. Not only I can't do it, but nobody can do it. But it is still, it was not any sort of cheap shot. I'm telling you, science fiction is like professional wrestling for the yellow circuit. That's what it is. All right, now you people are involved now here and in other cities. We'll have to take out any possible timeless element that you're involved now, all of you to some degree at this day, our point in time and space right now, I have you apparently trying to drag in some new people. But I'm telling you now, the people that are showing up, however you're doing it, whether I'm apparently keeping track specifically of what you're doing or not, the kind of people that are showing up that need relief, that would be the major point of contact between what they hope this is and what they think they need, of needing relief, of needing hope, of wanting just new occult secret information. People that are too locked into, they're too wired up into one of those three needs are not going to prove to be what will stick with this. The ones that we now need, and you just didn't know it, and even after tonight it's still not going to be all that clear, because as I said, it has happened since I started talking tonight. And so I can't expect you to immediately see it. But the people that you now need are simply those who want to be entertained in a particular way. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a mistake. It does not mean that we're now or that you're involved with finding some kind of lesser people that you thought what we needed were very deep, complex people looking for spiritual truths, people whose little heart in some way was bleeding, wanting some kind of new cosmic information. No, that's not being sarcastic. You just assumed that. But I'm trying to bring you to your contemporary senses tonight by asking you, I already pointed out, but now let me ask you, is that what any of you need anymore? No. You just hadn't really thought about it. It's the way the human beings are wired up. You still, without giving any analyzation, you still assume that by and large, good people, serious people, that may show up and want this, have sort of the same kind of hunger that you did when you started, and you still believe, you've never analyzed it, but you kind of accept that you still got that basic hunger, and you don't. Imagine what you used to daydream about being involved with such as this. Or the first time you laid eyes on me or heard some of this, or the second time or the third time, whenever you think it seems as though you're really getting caught up in it, and all your daydreams about it. When's the last time you thought about them? When's the last time they were pertinent? Well, maybe the last time you were really depressed. Maybe the last time you really thought you were about to die. But other than that, those days are gone. You don't come here to be frightened. You don't come here for me to say, boy, life is in terrible shape, but thank God you found me, therefore there is some possible hope. I couldn't pull that on anybody. And yet, if I hadn't presented to you in a certain way, you would have said that, yes, we're going to attract many people that need that. Many of the people that we're getting now, that's obviously why they're here. I'm not going to question right now whether your perception is right or wrong. Let's assume that perhaps it is workable, that what you're saying might be true to some segment of the people showing up. Then what I'm saying to you, that segment is not what is going to stay with us. What you really want now, and you didn't know it, what you really need now is people who want to be entertained in a certain way. That they already, it's not comparable to what you've been through. It's just mechanical, it's just the way it is. But what we now need are people who, just as they are really now beyond any fear of the afterlife. They're not religious. They're not anti-religious. They're not that all concerned about relief. They can afford medical care. They've learned to live with their aches and pains. And as far as there being secret knowledge, if you ask them now, the ones I'm saying that we need, they might say, well, you know, I used to hear some of that, or I used to have some faith in it, or it may be true, but, you know, so what? I don't know. I don't. If you know something, tell me what it is, and they wouldn't put it this way, but this is what they would be saying, the kind I'm saying that we need. They'd say, well, tell me what it is, and this is the unsaid part they would be saying. Tell me what it is, and I'll tell you whether I find it entertaining or not. Not in some particular mystical way useful, not enlightening, not that it's going to offer me some secret as to what may happen to me when I die. What they would really be saying is, tell me what it is, and I'll see if it's entertaining. If it is, maybe I'll come back. Does it keep me from being bored? What is going on in the cities where you are? People here, people getting this on tape right now. Assuming that you're seeing the tape after the sun's gone down, and the city's alive. Neon lights flashing, cars whizzing. What's going on? Restaurants, bars, theaters, symphony halls. What's going on? Are people out trying to get relief? Now, you can hear ordinary social commentators and somebody just writing a little short piece in the New Yorker or Psychology Today or something. They can say, well, people go out in hard times even. If the economy is bad, the attendance in movie theaters go up because people are trying to distract themselves. You know, psychological oatmeal. It's true enough in the city, but that doesn't tell you anything. People are not seeking relief by going to a movie, or to say, well, people worry so much about what tomorrow may bring. The new generation are so concerned about the possibility of a nuclear holocaust wiping us all out. That's why they listen to heavy metal music, just to kind of You know, they're hoping Twisted Sister will get them so deranged that they won't sit around their little room and get depressed and maybe smoke pot and worry about, I wonder if the Russians are going to come over and bomb us. Most teenagers nowadays don't even know where Russia is. The point being, the streets are not filled out there in our part of the world, in our part of life's body. And the part of life's body where we live is in a particular time zone. We are in the avant-garde of three-dimensional time zones. People are not out there going to movies. People are not even out there drinking to drown their problems. They're drinking to try and ward off boredom. If you can't find anything to do to be entertained, there are many, many people, not all of them in the world, not all of you. Some of you, it seems foreign, even when I talk about it. But it's a vast percentage of people on this planet, always have been, if they're pushed and they're absolutely bored and just nothing's going on and they got access to it, they will, by God, have a drink. And they may have several more. And if nothing exciting happens, at least they seem to, I guess we explained it several ways, they seem to, you know, they can at least pass out or get tired and go home and go, well, phooey, and go to sleep. But people are out there in the street tonight and out in places. They're listening to Mozart, to Bach, to Twisted Sister, Julio Iglesias. They're seeing movies. They're at museums, they're at art openings, and they can explain, and it is explained in the city. It's divided up into these institutions. There are critics for all of them, and they could try and give, well, they're accepted. When I say try and give, they're given and they're accepted as being critiques, psychological explanations as to why some people like art, what it might mean and all that, and it all means this. They're out there doing almost anything to keep from doing nothing. And that's not psychological. If there was such a dichotomy, it is strictly physiological. You have got to stimulate the nervous system. You're not human. It has got to be fed. It has got to be excited. Religion, off and on, throughout history. I'm not going to go into this a great deal because after all this time, I've just about had it talking about religion, and all of you about had it. I don't have to deal with it much anymore with you. I know individually it still pops up in some of you. But again, as I said, taken as a four-dimensional whole, I'm really past the point that I have to worry or deal with any of you on an individual basis as to religious themes, apparent religious themes, or me discussing it or apparently offering some new insight. In the city, in the 3D world, religion is no different than the symphony. It's no different than the NFL. It's just not. But I was going to say just one more, at least one more little thing. You could look at the progression, not linear, but the real progression of man going from having to daily feed himself and take care of himself into the area where now your biggest problem is just being bored. That what seems to be the idea of gods and religions changes, then reappears as this kind of progression takes place. But what are the gods of those struggling to live from day to day? What kind of gods do they have? Well, the kind of gods people always have are this. They have the kind of gods that are an absolute. This is not some kind of psychological explanation I'm giving you. The gods are absolute reflections of their nervous system, the circumstance of their nervous system. Frightened, starving people have frightening, starving gods. That's it. And if you get up somewhere in the middle, like the Middle Ages in the Western world, and you had a man that you would find, a man or woman then, that was wired up, and their attitude toward themselves and their own contrast of what appeared to be them as opposed to them, of I and me inside, that if it's harsh and dictatorial, their gods are harsh and dictatorial. It can't be otherwise. Nowadays, if the kind of people I'm talking about still had gods in this sense, they would describe them, I'd describe it for them, that my God, I think the greatest explanation I could give you, he's pretty bored with the whole thing. kind of like a California God. But what is happening is getting past the point of what I'm saying, the kind of people that we now need, the kind of people that I am really here to look after, to help feed now. It's past the point of them even worrying about ideas of gods. And of course, I'm not talking about people that are militant atheists. They're the kind of people out there in life that are still wired up and they're struggling with their forefathers' idea of gods. There's people where the idea of God is kind of irrelevant. It's like last year's situation comedy, and they took it off the air, and I didn't particularly care for it. I just forgot about it until you brought it up. That is really the extension of me saying, if they still had gods, the kind of people that we now need, their description of their God would not be vengeful, frightening, etc. They'd have to say, well, he's kind of bored. And all they're saying is, my nervous system is not being properly entertained anymore. It's a problem for me. And that is reflected in their sensation of a God, if they still had one like that. If they still had one like that, as I said, they're not really what we now need. They're not really what my flock should be. Your flock. There is still information that is for a few people, which is I am including all of you people in it, that there is still information that is the height of entertainment. But it is not dealing with hope, it's not dealing with relief, and it is certainly not on the basis simply that the information per se is important information, is enlightening information, that I'm going to finally say a word, a group of words that's going to open up your consciousness in some way, change your molecular structure. It is a gradual process if it happens, the kind that I say to really put a jolt into you and that you're really no longer the same anymore. But it's not just on the basis that the information was great. That if the jolt takes place, you do not, then you'll understand, at least slightly differently, that, well, the information was not really it. That there's nothing to memorize, there's nothing to remember. Once that kind of jolt takes place, it's as though you have graduated to another university somewhere. And it's not in a linear process. You didn't graduate from undergraduate class to graduate school, or from elementary school to high school. It's that you were in one class and suddenly it went off in the direction that you didn't even know that they were holding classes over there. And yet there you are. And so it was not that the information itself was this or that. It was the information was so goddamn entertaining that it put me on another planet. My nervous system is now stretched past the point of comfortable or even conflicting contrast. So you can say that it's still information of a sort, but the information is not based upon offering relief, hope, or simply information. It's information that is entertaining in such a way that it'll get you outside yourself. They'll make you become somebody else. That makes your molecules start running around, they bump into each other, and your listening ones get confused with your smelling ones. Your rational molecules end up dancing and asking your irrational molecules, could we go out later, maybe, a little coochie-coo or something. Your logical molecules end up picking up your illogical molecules and whipping the greatest story on them you ever heard. And you stand right there, since you are both of them, and you see yourself falling for it. You see that not I, but you, that you stand and see that I have seduced myself again, but never in this particular way. And then you see that you have seduced I, but never in this particular way. I guess I'll stop the absolute ad lib. I kind of got in a trap when I talked about doing the ad lib, because then, like I say, compared to what? Driving over here every night that we meet, I got to admit, nobody's ever asked me, and it's not important, but I do admit that I do give some, what do you call it, some thought, And sometimes I write down notes, and I try to keep track of things I've said, just so partly to help with outlines of the transcript. But at any rate, how about a little less ad lib? It'll sound more like our normal meeting. You ready? I'll pause here for a second, so if we ever want to cut this tape here, it'll be like we're starting all over. Like this will be the beginning of the tape, right? Continuing with the kind of allegorical template of man being a state, being a city, let me point out particularly, I've used the term before, and I did not mean it in a judgmental manner, but I've used the good old term of the bourgeoisie. The state of man, has an eternal bourgeoisie, the ultimate middle class. And as all of you know, the middle class has been forever, more than if we divide up life, as has been done into the upper, lower, and the middle classes. I assure you that the worst press has been had by the middle classes. Not the lower classes, not the riffraff, and not the upper classes. Not the dunderheaded, inbred, royal families and houses of Europe and other places, not the greedy billionaires. Think about it for a second. Who continually has received the worst press? The bad rap has always gone on the middle class boobs, people of no insight, dull, boring, predictable, stodgy, always in the way of progress, just through their lethargy. Those that apparently in life who have some talent, those who apparently have some sense of excitement and adventure. Who do they pick on when they write, when they make social commentaries? Who do they pick on? What seems to be just the opposite of the creative, the exciting people in life. Not the lower classes, not ditch diggers that may have no talent, not the foot soldiers who may display no particular joie de vivre when it comes to the artistic side of life. Who do they always pick on? The middle class, the burghers, the bourgeoisie. But life has an eternal middle class. Life has an eternal bourgeoisie. And it acts as a kind of human homeostat. It is like a balance mechanism in life, in that particular part of life's body that is human existence. And in a particular way that I wanted to point out, me saying it is like a homeostat, is every time change takes place in life's body, evolution, positive change, it has to be stabilized. The change does not come about using this continuing template of the state and cities and society divided into these tri-structure of upper, lower, and middle class. It is not the middle class that seems to be the C influence. It is not the middle class that would seem to be the origins of any creative change. Never. But when it happens, there's been some form of rebellion, some form of revolution, some form of positive change that obviously life is adopting until further notice, that it has moved in this way and it found it good, whether it seems good to a limited consciousness of the people in the city or not. If it does it, then very shortly, in real four-dimensional time, life has the middle classes suddenly rush over to this area that was dangerous, exciting, questionable, and they immediately rush in and turn it into a brand new Levittown. They immediately take it over and they squat there. The burghers move in. The bourgeoisie, the dunderheads, the dull-wits, the predictable, the unexciting people, life rushes them in to the frontier. To wherein yesterday it was Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp and lawlessness and people discovering gold and making fortunes yesterday at noon, and by 4 o'clock all the gold was gone and everybody had left, and it's now a ghost town. Right behind there, always plodding along, overweight, sausages hanging out of their pocket. The bourgeoisie. Now you people do know we're not actually talking, I'm not talking about actual people. That's not the point. The only reason this is true out in life is that everything that man does is man. Everything that life does is life. Everything that appears to be out there can be nothing else than a reflection of the internal molecular structure of in here. But here comes what has always been referred to as the middle class, the bourgeoisie. But life uses them, they come in and they stabilize newly won ground. But they are sitting ducks to everybody, especially people that apparently have any spark of creativity. But all of you came. Some of you may not immediately see this, but all of you came. Anybody gets involved with this right here, right now, all of you came from good old bourgeoisie stock. All of you. The close generations, that preceded you down your particular DNA line, I assure you, were very good bourgeoisie stock. And in your younger days, you may have found it offensive, you may have criticized your family, you may have thought that they were too dull and too boring, and et cetera, and that they had no appreciation of your artistic talents, and et cetera. The middle class must come along, this aspect of life's body, not people, not individual people deciding something, being motivated in a certain way. It's life itself moving a large segment of its molecular structure, known as humans, into newly won ground, where it's expanded itself in a certain way. It sends in the middle class to create a new suburb. It must. But there is a basis also for this feeling historically among certain parts of life's body that the middle class are worse than laughing stocks. They're dangerous. They're so stodgy, they're so conservative, so reactionary that they might hinder progress. There's a truth, there's a reality behind that feeling, and it's simply this, that for a real revolutionist, you cannot tolerate the middle class moving in and taking over. It's going to happen. It'll happen in you. A change happens, and then you accept it. The middle class moves in, but what you cannot do is to tolerate that. You can't accept, well, hey, they took over the swamp and they built Levittown. What are you going to do? If you're a real revolutionist, what you're going to do is get the hell further away from them. That's what you got to do. But everybody else, it's a relief. It's a relief to get to be 21. It's a relief to get to be 40. It's a relief to get to be 50. Apparently you keep dropping these other bad habits. What you're doing is you're taking in less and less energy. You're more and more bored. You become the middle class of life. You're supposed to. But if you're going to be a real revolutionist, you can't. You cannot tolerate it. Civilization keeps catching up with you in here. But as soon as it does, you've got to move. You cannot live in the suburbs. You can't. How about some bits and pieces? There's a common phrase that I have heard, and I'm sure all of you have heard, in reference to some group of people or some specific person. Some social observer will point out, will opine that this person or this group of people are far too complex to just be easily, verbally dissected or explained. And it's not true. And all of you should, on your good days, have a direct sensation of this. One of the most recent times I've heard this kind of description, this attempted description, was on the news. They were covering some family that turns out they've got 8 children, or whatever it was. All 8 of them are in medical school. All 8 of them were star athletes in high school, and all 8 of them are superb musicians. And they all get together, and all 8 of them play, and all of them get together, and they replay chess games of the masters in their head. All 8 of them get together, and they play one-on-one basketball, and they look like that they are refugees from an NFL camp. It's just amazing. That sort of thing. And to say, well, all right, whatever could bring about this kind of family, and they interview the mother and the father, and what kind of influences. Well, we used to play Mozart and hold the speaker against my wife's tummy when she was pregnant. And then when the children were just 2 years old or 6 months old, I used to let them play with chess pieces. And I used to sit and read them some of Paradise Lost in the Greek translation that I personally made when I was at Oxford. And so you've got all this information apparently going on. And then a commentator, a news person, a reporter, somebody say, well, still, this scenario, these people involved, and human nature, of course, but here, this particular instance, the people are so complex that there just is. There's no readily available verbal analyzation or dissection of it. Thank you, and this is so-and-so reporting from Indianapolis. Like that's the end of it. That everybody that's intelligence got to agree that, yes, you're right. That's far too complex a subject that we can cover here in a 2-minute segment on the news, or that you can stand right there after telling us about it and then stand with a microphone looking at the camera and say, well, what brings about a family like this is such and such. No, it can't be done. And it's not true. It's just nonsense. It can be done. There's no difference between being multi-talented and being that's far too complex a subject that we can cover here in a 2-minute segment on the news, or that you can stand right there after telling us about it and then stand with a microphone looking at the camera and say, well, what brings about a family like this is such and such. No, it can't be done. And it's not true. It's just nonsense. It can be done. There's no difference between being multi-talented and being exceptionally stupid. There's no difference between those people as a group. Then, see, but they wouldn't look at it this way. If you made the reporter go down, and he went down the local trailer park, and you walked in there, knocked on the trailer, and found a guy that works part-time as a mud boy for some bricklaying crew, and he's got 7 kids. Most of them are fairly illiterate, and to them the height of excitement is watching a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Not only his kids, but his wife. And if they tried to talk to them about the level of their excitement, their insight, their philosophical interest in life, their knowledge of world affairs, they might conclude, well, here is a living example almost of prehistoric people here in our midst. Would they say that this is far too complex to be easily dissected? No. They could dissect them just almost immediately. Like, here is living proof of the lack of education. Here, these people are just walking examples of the negative aspects of economic or cultural deprivation. And so they would say, well, that's simple enough. It is the same thing that they believe they're describing as those individuals or groups of people that are far too complex. That, in other words, certain areas of human nature, human existence, some of them are too complex to lend themselves to handy verbal dissection, and some are not. But all it has to do with is which end of the spectrum they apparently are observing. That is, which end of the spectrum apparently of the evolutionary movement of humanity. But to say that that which apparently is more complex does not lend itself, it's nonsense. Everything is exactly what it appears to be. And so if you say, we got a family here that are exceptionally talented, Okay, that's true. The ones that I made up or the ones that I told you that I'd seen something like that similar on TV. Just take the report. It says, hey, this is an exceptional family. All right. This is way out of the ordinary to have 8 kids and all 8 of them be in medical school. Yep. Hell, I know that. And all 8 of them not only have that kind of intellectual wherewithal that they're in medical school, they got there, they passed their tests and got in school, but they're also, all 8 of them, splendid physical examples. Is that unusual or not? More unusual. And all 8 of them are talented musicians. Well, all they can get together and play, and you would think that they were just practicing right outside a symphony hall somewhere. So what? I'm not attacking them. I'm not dismissing them. But to say, well, that this person, this group of people, are too complex to be easily dissected is nonsense. To be multi-talented is to be the same, as far as being dissectable, is the same thing as being non-talented. To be extremely intelligent, they've got some little kid here that he does not need his father. He's 4 years old. He doesn't need a father to read him some homemade Greek translation of Paradise Lost. Here's a 4-year-old kid reading Greek. That's far too complex to describe away. We're not talking about now some 4-year-old kid that can look at cartoons and go, mouse, mouse. But it is the same. When you start moving toward the development of the higher circuits in man, in an individual man and a group of men, in humanity, then it's got to be those, along with that push, to observe it. They're the ones that report on it, they're the ones who write about it, they're the ones who critique it. The bricklayers don't even notice it, or if it's pointed out to them, they go, who cares? It's the ones already riding along that crest in that area to observe it. And so it is necessary, that's what I want you to see from one sense, it is necessary that men up in that area, which is the avant-garde of life's 3-dimensional evolution, that those men believe that they individually and humanity, that is intelligent humanity, sophisticated humanity, that they are wired up to believe in their own complexity. Very seriously. How else? Now you got to listen fast. This is not sarcasm, nothing wrong, but how else, if you had a 4-dimensional sight just for a second, can you explain, for instance, that the most educated, the most sophisticated people right now believe that they have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind? When, if they would listen to me, if it weren't for an ACB, if I could play with justice, and they would just sit down and have a cup of coffee with me for just a couple of minutes, I could make them realize this is nonsense. And yet they can't see it. They don't want to see it. They don't have to see it. They can't see it. They're not wired up to see it. Life doesn't want them to see it. And therefore, it is necessary that people in general believe in their own complexity. The idea that life had Freud come along and espouse that we are divided into a dark unconscious that can't really verbalize, there are things going on in us that we can't bring to the conscious surface. You don't think that's a masterstroke? Do any of you think that I've ever poo-pooed that? That's much better in its own right than any ideas of Jehovah's and Satan's and bottomless pits and paradise lost or paradise found. No. This was the original black hole. This was the original little cosmic dust bunnies under everybody's bed. Anything that can't be explained, anything that I don't want to explain, I don't even want to think about it, it's too complex. It's the subconscious mind. Why do I act like I act? Why do I do things? Why do I always hurt the one I love? as the song goes. I don't know. There's no explaining it. But that's what happens when you got a subconscious mind. You'll do things like that. Jeez. That's what it is to be human. We're so complex that I can't explain why I do things that seem to be to my own disadvantage, but you do similar things, don't you? And the person goes, yeah. And so then you can both kind of hold hands, do a dance step about we're far too complex to be easily, handily, verbally dissected. And it's not true. It's the person, if you had that kind of 4D sight about everybody else and yourself. But the person who says, well, I seem to do things that I would say goes or works to my disadvantage. I would say to you that I have certain names and I could define them as such and such, but then I would admit to you that I periodically, if not constantly, but at least periodically, I will then behave in ways that conflict with my stated aims. But then, the gist of that is, that's so complex that can't be explained. It just was explained. The explanation was, I state certain goals and then I do things otherwise. Well, it could be simpler. There's nothing complex about that. But whereas somebody else could come along and say, well, I have these goals and I can state them as such and such, and I never do anything. Never do anything. I never behave in any way that does not, or I don't behave in any way that conflicts with this. At times I can't seem to make any particular profitable movement at that day or that week, but when I can't, I just kind of pull in my horns and pull back and I lay low. But I tell you what, I will not get out there in the marketplace. I will not do that which conflicts with my goals. Is that man more complex than the first one, less complex? Neither. Well, how can we dissect him? No need to. He just did. I never behave in a way that will conflict with my goals. That's it. Case closed. What else is there to say? But in the city, under all ordinary circumstances, there has got to be the contrast. There has got to be the apparent conflict. But you're surrounded, even if you don't hear this particular term all the time, you're surrounded by this particular flow of energy that says that humans, individually, collectively, human nature, is too complex to be understood. And it is not. Of course, then you have got to understand this, that everything that seems to be questions having to do with man are not actually questions. Which is why there are no answers. But these apparent questions about why do men have aims and then behave in ways that conflict with the aims? And that sounds rather psychological, but that's the same kind of questions that religious people ask, just with different words. So you could say that that is one of, or the ultimate eternal question. Why does man act like he acts? And as far as everyone at the three-dimensional level is concerned, philosophers, theologians, the man in the street, as far as they're concerned, when it's put to them that way, they would say there is no answer to that. We haven't found it, or we can't find it, or maybe we'll never find it. But that's the kind of thing that cannot be answered. It is too complex. And for somebody that belongs in this, that's nonsense. But the first nonsense, and it's not relief and it's not hope, it's fun. It's to see that you worried all your life, one way or the other, about wanting secret information, to meet a great secret guru, to learn a secret magic trick or a bunch of tricks, find out the answers either through information or through being given an exceptional degree of hope. But the real fun is to see for yourself what nobody else can see, that the reason that there are, quote, no answers to these questions, they are not really questions. Life is not asking you a question. People are not asking you a question. Of course, all they can do is what life does. They're not questions. I let it be read last time as a story, but I'm going to have to tell you the truth. The story about the plantation and Mr. Charlie, I didn't make that up. There are no answers because what appears to be questions are not questions. There are means to keep ordinary people, give the always possibility of stimulating the nervous system. That is, doing something interesting, doing something non-boring. Not that everybody, of course, sits around and philosophically ponders such questions. Many people just argue. Many people just fight. And they don't know that they're arguing. They'd say, well, I'm not going to get in a fight. I've never been in a fight in a bar with some guy over the question about, I think, therefore I am. That is not what I fight over. I admit I sometimes get in conflicts, but it's always over. And then fill in the blank. The relative merits of the new manager of the Braves, of the Giants. How are the Houston Oilers going to do this week? Are you going to vote Republican? It's all the same thing. And then people will say, well, human nature is so complex that we can't answer this. Why do people fight? Why in God's name are there people out in the street now punching one another in the nose over whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're black or whether you're white, whether you're Jewish or whether you're Muslim? It can't be answered. My God, when is humanity going to progress to the point that we can answer these questions? When are we going to come up with the answers? You don't even have a question to start with. That's why you can't come up with an answer. That's not a question. To say, well, why do people fight? That's not a question. That's like being it's a question for a man to say, well, why do I do things? Why do I behave in such a way that goes against my stated aims? What I truly, in my little heart of hearts, believe I want, why is it that I'll turn right around and do things that is in conflict with it? It sounds like a question, doesn't it? It's not a question, it's a statement of fact. That is the verbal dissection of that person, their wiring pattern, that part of life's body. They have just dissected themselves when they said, well, it's too complex for me to verbally dissect it, me or anyone else. Talk about the speed of light. I should rename it, talk about the speed of being overlooked. You just did. You just did. Humanity, this is so simple, I can't resist repeating it for at least a third time. It is necessary that people, humans, individually and collectively, that is, philosophically, their attitude, those who think in such a way, they're made to think in such a way. But people are made to believe in their complexity. Your own complexity, everybody else's complexity. And there is no such thing. Everything analyzes itself, everything speaks for itself. Things are just exactly what they appear to be. And human consciousness is wired up at this level that makes it impossible for that to be accepted. Because at that level, 2 and 2 does not come out 4. It always comes out 3. It's always lacking. But that is not the fault of mathematics. The math at that level is such that it must come out to where the equation apparently is unbalanced. If not, it would be terminal boredom. Everyone would have the answers. Everyone then would be satisfied. We, in a sense, that had been a part of life's body, then would die. We would all be in the midst of gangrene. That which appears in the city, that which appears at the ordinary level to be exceptional, is no more exceptional than the routine. Even if I granted you, if you can follow this right quick, if you pick out something and say, wait a minute, this person, this group of people, this historical event is exceptional. And if I say, okay, then what? The point is, just because you call it exceptional, the exceptional is no more exceptional than the non-exceptional. Did it happen? I mean, if you're going to say, well, this happened, and I don't want to argue with it, or it doesn't even matter, or who knows, and I say, okay, I agree. The point is, so what? Yeah, but this was exceptional. Okay. How about some other stuff? Well, all right, here's some other events. That's very unexceptional. All right, so the first is so complex that it's in some way different from the routine, right? Your nervous system has to believe that. There would be no contrast. There would be no apparent reason to move. And all of these are not descriptions. All of these are not proof. When you see it, it's entertaining. It's not me trying to prove something, because if I can prove it to you, or if you begin to see it, it's getting too late anyway. That it doesn't have much value once you begin to see it. But the exceptional, this is what the mind can't deal with. The exceptional is no more exceptional than the mundane. To believe otherwise is to think, my God, it's an apple. It's a fucking apple. And all around it are oranges. And you're just wired up that you just find apples just be astounding. An apple is no more astounding than an orange. And of course there would be people to use that binary sampling. There'd be people that say, an orange. Oh Jesus, an orange. I could just die. You know, get those apples out of the way so I can see that orange. It's the same thing. The exceptional is no more exceptional than the humdrum. But if that were actually true in the city, you would have acute terminal boredom would have been setting in. The nervous system of humanity, individually and humanity, could not be stimulated anymore. You could receive no food. You would not be alive. There's something else I could mention. That no one really knows what they what. Words to live by. If you're not living too swift, words to go by if you're not going too far. But nobody really knows what they what. They do not. Now, in the ordinary belief in the city about how complex people are, if you ask them, people would say, well, yeah, I do know. And they would mention one of the four things. If you say, what do you want? And they'd say, well, if for some reason they took it seriously, whatever reason. If they responded to you or they thought you might could help, whatever, if they responded. Most of them would fall in the first three categories of what they want is some kind of relief from something going on, some kind of hope, some kind of information. But as I said, if you can see it 4D-wise, the kind of flock, the kind of people that we now need really, make up the fourth one, that what they really want, whether they can express it that way yet or not, is they want to be stimulated. They want to be entertained. It's got to be on a wider spectrum than is normally available in the areas that would just be feeding ordinary people in one circuit or the other. But in a four-dimensional sense, when I started this, I wanted you to grasp, because you can find it true in you. At the ordinary level, no one knows really what they want. You never have. You're closer now than ever. What you really want now, the basis of the conditions I've set up the last few weeks, most of you now, in a lucid moment, if I ask you what you really wanted, or you ask yourself, what you want is for me not to stop all this. You want this to continue. But up until that point, nobody knows really what they want. Oh yeah, except those who believe they do. And there are some of those. And they appear to be what is commonly referred to nowadays, I guess, as the movers and the shakers of the world. They're the ones I've mentioned to you in passing who have the least amount of interest, approaching zero interest in such matters as this. Religion, philosophy. They're the ones, in a sense, are working most diligently for life in one area of life's factory. The real entrepreneurs, the real inventors, the real robber barons, the real power grabbers throughout history. In a sense, they are some very faithful foot soldiers to the liege of Mr. Charlie. Because they believe, they're right up to believe that they do know what they want. And it may appear to be real crude if you say, what do you really want? The guy says, more money. Yeah, but I mean, you know, what kind of side effects? Fuck the side effects, I want more money. Yeah, but you're one of the richest men in the world now. Yeah, I know. But, I mean, what do you want now? Do you want some way, do you want to be able to slow down now and to be able to share the wealth or help humanity? I want more money. All right, throughout history, those people apparently also are sitting ducks to be attacked. The bourgeoisie sees those as being, no, we should break up these cartels. We should break up the money. We should redistribute the wealth. These people are suspect. These people can't be trusted. They got no soul. They got no morals. And yet, nobody likes to really point this out, and yet these are the people that end up with all the money and all the power all the time. The same type. But back to what is more pertinent to you people, is the truth is nobody knows what they really want except those who believe they do, which are a pretty small percentage of humanity, pretty small. But that part notwithstanding, nobody knows what they really want. You never have. The wired up, city-born patterns that pass for a human being, for a human organism, for a nervous system that answers to a name and has a memory, can formulate words and pictures inside neural molecular activity, pictures of things that actually exist out there. That thing in you and in everybody has never really known what it wanted. Now, I've said that enough in the last 5 minutes, right? You should be able to feel it. If you could strip down, as they would say, and hey, come on, face up and tell yourself the truth. You've never really known what you wanted. Just face it. You just have to go, oh, yeah, you're right. You are right. You should find that interesting. But it's just interesting, not because it's complex, but I'm telling you, nobody knows what they really want except for those few who believe they do. But nobody else. The bourgeoisie and then some of life's body, of life's molecular structure passing as men, never knows what they want. Is that real complex? Is that some kind of curse? Is that some kind of shortcoming? Is that some kind of unstabilized condition? It's just what it is. It explains itself. Nobody really knows what they want. Now can we move on? Are you waiting for an explanation of it? That is the explanation of it. It is its own explanation. If you knew what you wanted, my God, what would happen? Well, let's see. One of the dangerous possibilities in a linear world is you might try to get it. My God, what's even more dangerous, you might get it. Then what? When it seems to happen in life, of course, then what takes care of itself, apparently. What do you want now? I want more of this. Or I want a new one. I want a different color one. I want a taller one. It is not to actually get, if you knew what you wanted, to get that thing and go, well, that's it. Now I can, how many years have I got left to live? I don't have to do squat. Now that I got that, that's it. I got what I wanted. What else could you say? I am now happy. I am now fulfilled. I'm so delighted. I, among all people, got what I wanted. It's back to the kind of dual sampling, back to what appears to be problems such as unanswerable questions. In this sense, apparently people can never get what they want. But what they don't face up to is the first part, is nobody knows what they want. And it's not through some lack. It's not through some flaw on your part. Don't you see? It's impossible for you to know what you want because there's nothing you do want. Can you begin to see the beautiful arrangement to spend all of your life worrying about exactly what you want, trying to narrow it down, trying to refine it? Talk about staying active. Talk about the eternal hobby. Talk about the supreme hobby. I'm finally going to get it really codified, streamlined. I'll get it down. Now, it's almost within my grasp of what I really want. Nobody knows what they really want because nobody really wants anything. But it's a feeling. People do not put it this way, but to bring us back to where I was trying to drag your attention coevally tonight, now the kind of flock that we need, the kind of people we need, the kind of audience we need for this, that if they could express it this way, they would be close, that maybe we could jog them into it a little bit, to say what they really wanted, and they didn't actually know it, but what they really wanted was to be entertained. I just can't find exactly the right way. Movies, sometimes, some movies seem better than the other, and sometimes I can watch TV. Sometimes I still, believe it or not, I'll read a book or a part of one. And sometimes I go out to a ball game, or I'll go to the races. But something's lacking, and it's no longer the group that we need. It's no longer them saying what's lacking is a spiritual need. What's lacking is the fulfillment of my religion. They know that they're not going to be entertained in churches and synagogues and temples and mosques. They want to be entertained, and they don't know exactly what it is. And of course, there's a good reason. Even if they knew what it was, there is nobody furnishing that entertainment. It does not accidentally happen that a club, a church, a theater opens up furnishing this kind of entertainment. The only people who do this are those who know they're doing it and those who intend to do it. You don't do this accidentally. Now, it appears so in life. And what it is three-dimensional reflections of this. But it would be such as this, since I've been using off and on at times terms from physics, and I've been talking about dimensions. And all of you, I assume, know as well as I do that in mathematics and in physics now there are people who apparently are searching for other dimensions, or that there are people who, mathematicians or whoever they are, who say that they can prove to their own intellectual satisfaction that we're living in the middle of 9 or 11 dimensions, and they cannot mathematically prove it. They can't draw it, and you can't picture it, etc. The point being that you could almost say, well, this sounds very close. And periodically, people hear bits of these tapes. People send me clippings from magazines. People have sent me books, little smiling faces, and like turn to page 17 or 142. And of course, as soon as I see the book, the name of it's something like Particle Physics and the Future of Human Consciousness, and somebody sends it and says, you will really enjoy page 497 at the bottom. I know what it is before I turn. It's going to sound like something that I said. Or maybe they believe that I stole it from the book, or maybe they believe that now I'm having such an effect upon the intellectual reality of humanity that people, without knowing it perhaps, are beginning to be influenced by my ideas. That is not the way life works. That's just the way it would appear to be. That would have to be one of those possibilities, one of those kind of possibilities, but that's only in a linear 3D world. When you begin to see in a 4D world, it just expands out. Then all of this, these ideas that I seem to have, they just didn't spring up from somewhere, from nowhere. they're not absolutely mutations, or they can't be singular mutations. A mutation itself infers it's just an alteration of some other established pattern. The point is, you can have in science, years ago it would have been easier to make an example to say that there would be other religions or would be mystical systems around that might sound like this. But now you could even find science. The point that I'm trying to get you to see, that most of you should know as soon as I say it, it's not an attack on science or an attack on anybody. It's not that this is so superior. But even that which apparently would sound as though it's involved with this is not, unless they know they are, and they're not. You don't accidentally do this. Now, you can be working for life like we all are, and you could be closer to this than, let us say, a guy who holds up 7-Eleven stores for a living, or closer than the Jacksonville, Florida chapter of Hell's Angels, than this group of scientists looking for the 11th dimension. We could say, if you insist, that they are closer to this kind of activity than the Hell's Angels gang, at least a particular chapter that I noted. You could say that they're closer, but still there is all the difference in the world. There's the same difference in the world as between the third dimension and the fourth dimension, because it goes off at another angle. You don't just do this and not know it. The only people who are actually, quote, doing this, what few there are on this planet at any given time, the only ones, quote, doing this, know they are, and they're intending to. They're not intending to prove mathematical reality of an 11th dimension. They're not attempting to prove that God is still alive. They're not attempting to prove that their guru or their teaching is superior. They're not attempting to prove that Atlantis did exist and this information has been buried and forgotten. They're not attempting to prove something. And they're not accidentally close to this. They may sound like they are. Life knows what it's doing, and I'm not telling you that there's any judgment involved with it. But some of you keep running across little areas like this. The only reason I bring it up, or one of these reasons. The only people who do this know they're doing it, and they intend to do it. That's it. It's not an accident. And it's not something you casually fall into. It's not something that you sort of maybe open up a plumbing supply house, and then over a period of years, the way things end up, that just before you know it, you end up doing this. The only thing I'm inclined to do for any more time on the tape is a few more odds and ends. That's what should we call them? How about something else? How might one spot a real revolutionist on a 3D level? What might be any indication? Now, we're not talking about you being able to identify me or somebody else. We're talking about this for your own personal use. But what might be some identifying, one possible description of a real revolutionist? And I must admit, this one came to me not on the way over here tonight. This one came to me running in the rain about 3 days ago. Don't ask me why, because I didn't ask me why. But how about this? And I'm just going to give you this one, just one. And I was going to conclude this one section by asking, I'm not giving it to you as a real task or a hobby, but you might play with it yourself about what kinds of descriptions would come to you. But the one that hit me, which is the only ones I ever relay to you, no worse than that. The only things I ever think about hit me, so. Just trying to keep us honest. I'm trying to, what does the Pope say? I'm trying to level with you. How might one spot? What might be the characteristics of a real revolution? All right. He or she would be intellectually formidable. He or she would be no physical threat to anyone. And he or she would be plain and direct with everybody while still being sparse with words. How's that for a rainy day? What might you come up with? I wouldn't try to plot it necessarily. But maybe you can try my way of being inspired. Next time it rains, get out and run. And see if you believe that that's actually the way to do it. I think I will conclude the tape by asking one more entertaining question. By the way, if we survive, if I don't close all this up, I mentioned to you last time we were taping that, not to make you feel bad, but it was sort of a shame that everybody was so busy and I had this running right at the rough edge. The distinct possibility of all this being closed up, which the distinct possibility is still there. But I just said that it was sort of a shame that we were so busy that I had a backlog of tasks that you would have found delightful. If we survive all this and we go back into doing those, I don't know how I ever fell into such a crude trap as calling them tasks. Because those of you that did them right, you know they're not tasks, they're not some kind of responsibility, it's not homework, they're hobbies. They're entertainment. But the entertainment, when they're done right, because I pick them out right, but then when you do them right, when everything is just right, they are entertainment personified. They're entertainment that takes care of the first three. It's entertainment that swallows any notion of information, hope, or relief. It swallows them and then belches and smiles. My question. So at any rate, if we go back, I'm no longer going to call them tasks. So look at this as a potential verbal and then otherwise hobby if you had the time to deal with it. Do you think that life actually knows itself if it wants this to expand at any particular time? Do you think that life really fully knows right now if it wants this? What we're doing, it's just us, regardless of what else is going on in the planet right now. Do you know, can you feel, are you sure? What do you think? What do you feel? Does life really know if it wants this to expand or not? Maybe just stop. But does life really want this to expand? You would, probably without any great analysis, you would have immediately said, well, yeah, sure, because I want it to expand. It's intellectually formidable. It's not a threat to anybody. We're not anti-anything. And when those that can hear it, it's plain and it's direct. It is not confusing. It is not to take advantage of someone for anybody's purpose. It's got to be good. It's got to be, at the very lowest level, it's got to be good for life in general, because it's good for anybody that can hear it. It's been good for me. But are you sure that life knows at any particular time if it wants this to expand? And if you feel like, well, yeah, it's got to be, since nothing bad can be said about it. All right, if it's that good, then why is it not more popular? I don't mean just me and you, but throughout history. And it's not even so popular. Forget the National Football League. It's not even as popular as the Canadian Football League. It's not even as popular as Friday night high school football in Oklahoma and Indiana and Alabama. Never has been, never will be. It's not as popular as the worst B-grade slasher horror movie showing at the drive-ins. And yet you would think, I submit, speaking for you, that without a great deal of analysis, if I'd said, do you think life always wants this kind of thing to expand? You'd think, well, yeah. Really? I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying, really? I always like to say, really? One final sub-question. Not only do you think that life really knows, let me ask you, do you think that you can really know? That's when it gets dirty, if you can hear me, if you can get outside three-dimensional linear reasoning. If life can know, then you can know. Or, if you can know, then obviously life can know. Because life's a lot smarter than you, but if you can know, if I say, can you really be sure that this should expand, that it is going to expand? And you go, well, without any doubt, I bet my life on it. So if you know that much, if you're that sure, then of course life is. Back where we started. Are you sure life does? I think that we will stop here for the night.